Okay, so now let's do the other topics chapter. So we're going to first start with adjectives and adverbs. Now, again, you're not going to be asked to identify, like, hey, is this an adverb? Hey, is this an adjective on the exam? It just helps to know how to identify these so that you can know, like, when the placement is off. Because that's typically what is going to be, like, tested if they test you on this. Again, these are like more rare, which is why it's towards the end of the book. They might also test you on like they improperly used one, but like that's kind of like easy to kind of hear. So I don't like, I don't see that really happening as much versus some of the other errors that I'm going to point out. So adjectives basically describe and modify nouns and pronouns. So they usually go before the nouns and pronouns that they describe, but they go after to be verbs. So here we have some correct examples. Sam is a well-rounded student. So here the adjective well-rounded is describing the noun student. Sam's parents were impressed by his initiative. So in this case, impressed would be the adjective. Sam is one of the brightest students in Mr. Andrews' class. So in this case, brightest would be the adjective here. So sometimes with adjectives, we like instead of saying more something like more cheap, we say cheaper. So if we have more plus an adjective, we basically make it end in er. So you could say buying a phone is cheaper than buying a laptop. And then with most plus the adjective, that would be when it ends in est. Like instead of saying like the most fancy, we would say mine is the fanciest. Now, one thing that they might test you on is that we're not allowed to use, for instance, like we couldn't say more cheaper. Like if you're already adding the ER at the end, you have to get rid of the more. So basically, the same thing happens with most. Like you can't put most and then also have it end with est. So it would be correct to say Sam is the strongest student in his class. It's also correct to say Sam is politer than his brother, but it would be wrong to say Sam is the most strongest. That's just like redundant. And the same thing with, you can't say more politer. Like if it already ends in ER, you can't have more in front of it. If it already ends in EST, you can't have most in front of it. Now, adverbs describe or modify verbs, adjectives, and other adverbs. This one's kind of easy because a lot of the times they usually like go for verbs. So in the word adverbs, you have the word verbs, and also you have adverbs, so like they modify those. You can also just remember that with adjectives, they modify nouns and pronouns, and adverbs would be like other stuff, basically. So either way, they usually end in ly. So like if you see ly, it's probably an adverb. And then in terms of placements, these are going to go before or after verbs. They can also go before other adverbs or before adjectives. So let's look at some correct examples. We would say Sam waited patiently. So like here, patiently is describing how he waited. Waited is a verb, so that would be that would show that it's like an adverb. Also, it ends in ly, so like that's an example of that. And in this case, it comes after the verb, which is totally okay based off of our rules for placement. Now the next one says the rabbit simply vanished into thin air. So simply right here is before the verb that it modifies, vanished. Again, remember, we have, for placements, it could be before or after. It's okay. And then we have Amanda ran out of class unusually quickly. So unusually is describing quickly, and quickly, you can tell by the ly also, is just another adverb, and it has to, unusually is an adverb that modifies quickly, another adverb, so it has to be before that other adverb based on our placement rules. Jelly Roll is an incredibly talented songwriter, so incredibly has to go before the adjective right over here, talented. So now we're going to be doing the quiz for the adjectives and adverbs part of this chapter. So number 1 is referring to this portion right here. So it says the intense heat that they produce creates a distinct temperature contrast with the surrounding cold water and ocean water. Okay, and for this one, this kind of also has to do, I think it was in the punctuation chapter, I want to say, where when we were talking about commas, how you have that rule that if it's separated, like if you separate it with a adjectives with a comma, like they do right here, that means that and should be able to work there. So automatically I can cross out B and D just from that, because B and D are saying the same thing, cold ocean water, cold and ocean water. So those can be crossed out. Now, just in the context of the sentence, cold should be modifying ocean water. So you wouldn't say like cold water separately from ocean water. It would have to be that the cold is like directly modifying the ocean water. So the only option that gives us that would be C. So that's why it has to be C. So now let's go to number 2, which is referring to this part. The most tallest, automatically, remember we can't have most plus est at the end, so I can automatically cross out answer choice A. The most tallest named, I don't know how to say that, something in Hawaii is actually taller than Mount Everest if measured from its base on the ocean floor. So let's see. We have more tall of these, tallest of these, more tallest of these. So we can't use more tallest either. That doesn't work. So we're now choosing between more tall or tallest of these. So in this case, we're talking about like the tallest of the, what are they? Volcanoes? Underwater volcanoes? Yeah. So it would have to be C. Like it wouldn't be correct to say more tall, because it's the tallest one out of them. So it would have to be C. It also just kind of sounds weird. So now let's do number 3. However, most underwater volcanoes go unnoticed due to their deep, remote locations. So right away, like, again, another strategy you can use, which I've mentioned earlier, is look at the answer choices to kind of like help you determine what they might be testing. And I see right away that the theirs differ. And that's a really easy rule to just check for automatically to eliminate a lot of answer choices, since like they differ by like half the answer choices differ by that. So remember, there with an I is the one that's for possessive. Like it's possessing or showing ownership of whatever follows. And then THERE is the there that you use if you're not showing possession and if they are doesn't work. So here it says, however, most underwater volcanoes go unnoticed due to their deep remote locations. So the deep remote locations belong to the underwater volcanoes. So it's showing ownership or possession. Even though like volcanoes don't own anything, don't take it too literally when I say ownership or possession. You kind of get what I mean, like it's theirs. Then we would say it has to be the one with the I, so it either has to be answer choice A or B. So now we're left to see, okay, how do answer choices A and B differ? Well, I see that they differ in terms of the comma being, if there's a comma between deep and remote. Remember, you can easily check if the comma should be there by checking if like and should work right there. So I'm going to try it with and. However, most underwater volcanoes go unnoticed due to their deep and remote locations. So that works. So then it would be B. Now I kind of have to zoom out a little bit for number 4 so that you can see the question at the same time, but it says, but when they become particularly active, their eruptions can lead to the formation of new landmasses, such as the emergence of Surtsey Island off the coast of Iceland in 1963. Now, right away, I see that there's an ly with particularly, so I know that that's an adverb. So that's an adverb. Let me just write this out. And then I know that active is an adjective, so I'm going to write that out as well. So I have an adverb being placed in front of an adjective, so I can check placement really quick. And adverbs are supposed to go before the adjectives that they modify, so that would be a correct thing in terms of just checking placement. And I can see automatically that I can cross out answer choice B right there, because that would switch up the placement so that the adverb wouldn't be before the adjective like it's supposed to. Now, answer choice C, you'll see it's an ly right here. So like they change it so that actively becomes the adverb, modifying the, and then particular becomes the adjective in that case. So like the placement's okay, but it's changing the meaning of the sentence and like that particular portion in that context. You're saying when you say actively particular, it's like actively is describing particular, which is not what's meant to be happening. It's that particularly is supposed to be describing active in this context. So it can't be that one. And then here for answer choice D, that's just two adjectives, like particular and active. It just like following each other. There's no adverb modifying the adjective. So this would be wrong. And then, so the only choice that makes sense in the context and also with like the placement would be A. Now let's move on to words that always go together. So there's just like this list that I give you guys of words that must always be paired together. So a lot of these like you kind of already are used to and know just from like everyday kind of things. And we talked a little bit about like the more and less than when I was talking about like the then with the E versus than with an A in one of the other chapters. So a lot of this like we've either already talked about in some form, or it's just like stuff that you kind of already can like tell usually from how things are phrased. Now, the ones that I see them ask about the most, and again, I haven't like counted it, but it's just like based off of like what I feel like has come up the most, would be these right here, because they're usually the ones that, well, also like obviously testing than, but I kind of count that as more of like a then versus than that they're testing rather than like anything else. They're trying to test you on like whether you're supposed to use the E or the A version. So that's kind of different than like making sure words go together. But for the words that go together, for being tested on that, it's usually going to be from and to are supposed to go together, and also not only. And then they like to test you on but also, because a lot of people don't know that you don't have to have the also part. You can just have the but part. So like they're expecting you to kind of like be tripped up by that. They always want to ask you about like the stuff that they think is going to trick you the most, because it's like the whole point of these. And so that's one that I would watch out for. Just know that you can always use not only and but together, but it's also correct to say not only and also pair it with but also. And then there's just some other ones that of like words that always go together, but usually people know the other ones. So then let's look over some correct examples. So Justin is as talented as Rachel. As and as go together. Anna can either complete her homework or go straight to bed. So either and or go together. The local supermarket sells everything from food to home goods. So this, in this case, from and to go together. Sabrina is louder than Ava. Louder than, A has to, so it's using the correct version of than with an A. And then it has like an ER word with it as well. And then we have Ava has less money than Sabrina. So less and than, words that go together. Neither Mark Zuckerberg nor Jeff Bezos is as wealthy as Elon Musk. So neither nor go together. Cleopatra was not only an intelligent leader, but she was also a charismatic woman. Now, the reason I included this example was because it's also, students might get tripped up and say, oh, they did use the but they're placing the also in a different location. It's totally okay to put that there as well. It's just that you're pairing it together in the sentence. That's what matters. And again, you don't have to put the also part. That's why I put it in parentheses, because it's like optional to have that also be in the sentence. So then let's keep going. You may also be tested on parallel structure with prepositions for each pair of words. Let me just think of why I put this here. Oh, this is just like the thing where you have to make sure that just because you see a pair of matching words, it doesn't mean it's necessarily correct. It also has to be like the prepositions have to match. So that's kind of like with parallel structure, which we were talking about in the previous chapter. So like here you have for and for match, but it's not necessary to put for like the same preposition again. Like it's also okay to say So you could say Cleopatra was famous not only for her intelligence, but also for her charisma. And it's also okay to say Cleopatra was famous not only for her intelligence, but also her charisma. Both of those are correct. What would be wrong is to like completely switch up the preposition for one of them. Like you can't say Cleopatra was famous not only for her intelligence, but also with her charisma. Like you can't say for and with. You can't mix and match those prepositions there. And then we also have comparisons. So this is a lot less likely. Like if you're going to see a comparison, it's probably that they're testing you on if you should use the word more or most, or if you should use like the EST stuff or the ER stuff, like taller or tallest, or even more common would be like the then versus than, like the E then version versus the A, and when you use each of those. But I decided to include this just for like anyone that wants like a really, really high score or like perfect scores, because honestly, you could probably get a perfect score without knowing this part. But so comparisons, fewer and many, we use those for things that you can count. And use those with plural nouns. So basically, if you can count it, you can use fewer and many. And then less and much we use for things that you cannot count. So you use those with singular nouns. So some examples, these are all correct examples, would be I eat fewer vegetables than my sister. So there we would have fewer is being used for the thing that you can count, which is vegetables. And it's like a plural noun also. So I eat less candy than my sister. And so this, technically you can count candy. I've had like students point this out to me. Like technically you can count candy, but like I'm trying to think of how to describe it. But you're still like referring to the singular noun candy. So like the counting thing is more of like a trick that can help you a lot of the times, but like the singular and plural noun thing is like the kind of steadfast rule, if that makes sense. So then let's go to the next one. There are many types of electives offered at my school. So again, fewer and many, we use those for things we count when they're referring to plural nouns. So many is referring to the types of electives. And here it says there is much more dark humor on the internet than on television. So much is referring to how there's like more dark humor. So that would be a singular noun that we're referring to. So then we have that of. So that of we use when comparing two singular nouns. So like a correct example would be to say Australia's government is similar to the government of the United Kingdom. So there we're comparing the two singular nouns. So it would be okay to replace it with the phrasing of that of. So like it's okay to say the first example, but if you wanted to also say like, hey, I want to instead say that of, it's totally okay to do that because you're comparing two singular nouns. Like you could say Australia's government is similar to that of the United Kingdom because you're comparing those two governments, and each of those governments is a singular noun. Now we use those of when comparing two plural nouns. So again, with like this stuff that I'm talking about right now, it's usually like the steadfast rule is like, are you referring to or like comparing singular nouns or plural nouns is like, it's all related to that basically. So those of we usually comparing two plural nouns. So these would both be correct. You could say scorpions in Australia have stingers that are thrice as large as the stingers of scorpions in the United States. Or you could replace that with those of because you're comparing two plural nouns. You could say scorpions in Australia have stingers that are thrice as large as those of scorpions in the United States. Those would all be correct. Now, I put a little note here. The review test has some questions on this comparison stuff and words that go together, but there's no quiz for this part of the chapter just because, again, like I said, it is so rare that I think, and the purpose of this book is like to help you cram as efficiently as possible to get as high a score as possible, and then like learn all the rules fast so that you can start practicing with actual practice exams. So that's why it's not included here, but I did include some stuff on the review test at the end.